I've been quite surprised by the public reaction to Joseph Parker's 12-round points decision win over Andy Ruiz to capture the vacant WBO heavyweight world title on Saturday. Because a lot of people seem to believe that Andy Ruiz actually won the fight. That's certainly not the fight that I saw. I saw Joseph Parker as the more active fighter, significantly. I saw him controlling the fight from the outside. And I saw Andy Ruiz's attacks and success being very, very sporadic. He just wasn't throwing enough punches for me. When he did, a lot of his shots were missing. And when he was in range, to be fair to him, he did seem to get the better of the exchanges at mid-range and close range. But everything long range was all Joseph Parker. And as I say, he did make Andy Ruiz miss quite a lot. So I am a little surprised, almost perplexed by this idea that Andy Ruiz was robbed in the Joseph Parker fight. Even Andy Ruiz in the post-fight interview says he felt like it was a hometown decision, basically. I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially the gist of what Andy Ruiz has said. Again, I can't see that. And when it comes to fighters, a lot of the time they are the worst people to be judging a fight, which they're actually in. If they're on the outside looking in, watching a different fight, then yeah, they can be good judges a lot of the time. But when they're actually in the moment, in a fight themselves, they're not the best people to be judging, because a fighter's mind is always looking at the positives of every situation, particularly a successful fighter, because they have to keep a positive mental attitude all the time in order to actually prevail in fights. If they take a couple of shots here and there, get outboxed for a couple of rounds, they need to be telling themselves in their head, actually, nah, he didn't do that well in that round. I hit him with that jab to the body. I hurt him with this shot. I backed him off with this combination. That's how they keep themselves in a fight mentally and keep themselves positive and don't allow themselves to feel emotionally down. So when you take that into account, the boxer's view of the fight that he's actually in is not always a realistic view from an objective standpoint of how the action really plays out. So, I mean, just for example, look at Dylan White in his post-fight interview, or one of his post-fight interviews following his victory over Derek Chisora. He said he only thought Chisora won a couple of rounds in the fight, which is extraordinary because that was a very, very close fight, which really could have gone either way. But Dylan White's there saying Chisora only won a couple of rounds. Yeah, again, in his mind, he's not viewing the fight the same way that me and you are, because he's keeping a positive attitude regardless of what Chisora's doing to him. He's thinking, to hell with them shots, they didn't affect me. I got him with this punch and I got him with that punch. Yeah? Anyway, let me not labor the point too much and get back on track. A lot of people are saying that Joseph Parker's performance against Andy Ruiz wasn't impressive. This is another thing I've heard. And they've said that based on that particular fight right there, he would get destroyed by Anthony Joshua and that he's got no chance. It seems as though when it comes to heavyweight boxing these days, if a heavyweight goes the distance and don't knock a guy out, then all of a sudden it's shock horror, a terrible performance. I'd like to give you guys a little bit of perspective. Those of you who think that Joseph Parker's performance against Andy Ruiz was poor, I'd like to offer a little perspective, a little food for thought right now. Back in 1992, was it 92 or I think it was 92. Back in 1992, Lennox Lewis, who I think we can all agree is one of the greatest heavyweights of the past few decades. Back in 92, he fought a journeyman. And this guy was a real journeyman. The guy had no amateur fights. He was a club fighter, really, called Levi Billups. The fight went 10 rounds. This was in early 92. And Ruiz had a lot of problems in that fight. He got hit with a lot of punches. It was a tough encounter. Billups was competitive. He never managed to drop Billups. He ended up with a cut on his eye that required stitches, Lennox Lewis, and a puffy face. He did win the fight on points, but it certainly wasn't easy. I can tell you for a fact, having lived through that era and followed the career not only of Lennox Lewis, but also Levi Billups to a certain extent, that Andy Ruiz is a hell of a lot better than Levi Billups. But you guys might be saying, well, this must have been very early in Lewis's career, long before he fought for any titles. So how is this even relevant, Hatman? Well, actually, no, it wasn't long before he fought for any titles. He fought Levi Billups in the very same year that he fought Razor Ruddock. He had that tough fight with the journeyman Billups. A few months later, in late 92, he fought Razor Ruddock, who at the time was widely regarded as the second most dangerous heavyweight on the planet after Mike Tyson. And he wiped Razor Ruddock out in 2 rounds. How many people would have thought that after seeing him just a few months earlier struggle against a journeyman like Levi Billups and take loads of punches and go 10 rounds, that he'd be able to get in there with Razor Ruddock and wipe him out in a couple of rounds? Nobody going into the fight thought that. And I know there's a lot of armchair experts who think that they know the heavyweight landscape back then, and they're going to say, well, Ruddock was shot after the Tyson fights. He certainly wasn't shot. If you think the Tyson fights took something out of him, fair enough. But he had 2 victories after the Tyson fight. And again, he was still widely regarded as the most dangerous fighter in the division apart from Tyson. Nothing in those 2 fights after the Tyson rematch had the majority of people thinking that he would get blasted out in 2 rounds by Lennox Lewis. Those 2 fights were a knockout victory over Greg Page, a former heavyweight champion, and a knockout victory in, 3-4 rounds over Phil Jackson, who was an undefeated heavyweight prospect and a big puncher at the time. So going into the Lewis fight, people thought, okay, Lewis might be able to win, but he's going to have to box and do it on the back foot. He can't get involved in a tear up with Ruddock, and he can't allow Ruddock to hit him. Nobody imagined that Lewis would knock Ruddock out in that fashion, particularly after, as I say, earlier on in the same year, going the distance with journeyman Levi Billups. And yet Lewis went on to become one of the greatest heavyweights, as I say, over the past few decades. So let's not be so reactionary when it comes to Joseph Parker, or any fighter for that matter. Styles make fights, and just because Andy Ruiz is fat, it don't mean he can't fight, because the boy's got fast hands. He's a good counter puncher on the front foot. He does have skills. And as I say, he's definitely better than Levi Billups. So if it was, I don't want to say wrong, but if it was not the wisest thing to do to dismiss Lennox Lewis because of his Levi Billups fight, then it's certainly not the wisest thing to do to dismiss Joseph Parker just because of his Andy Ruiz fight. I would argue that Andy Ruiz is better than anybody that Anthony Joshua has fought so far as a professional. That's my argument. Yeah, maybe some of you might disagree, but that's how I personally feel. I feel like Ruiz is better than any guy Joshua's beaten so far. So why would you say that based on Parker's performance against Ruiz, he's automatically going to get destroyed by Joshua? I didn't even think it was a bad performance. I don't get it. Somebody needs to explain to me why that was a bad performance. And again, those people who felt that Ruiz won the fight, again, look, people, I didn't make a prediction for the fight, so I'm not here defending a prediction. I'm not Mexican. I'm not from New Zealand or Samoa. So I don't have a horse in this race. I'm totally objective when I'm looking at Joseph Parker, Andy Ruiz. And from what I saw, Joseph Parker won the fight, I think, fairly comfortably. And it was a decent performance against a dangerous opponent. That's the way I see it. Yeah, I'm very interested in, minus all the insults, because when people just start leaving insults and all this angry stuff and all that business, I just delete their comments. Sometimes I block them, right? If you want to oppose what I'm saying or dispute what I'm saying or give your view as to why you think it was a poor performance by Parker and why maybe you think Andy Ruiz won one or the other, then yeah, drop a comment below. I'll be very interested to read it. Maybe you'll change my mind or whatever, at least on the issue of whether it was a bad performance or not. Because I do think that Parker won the fight legitimately. Maybe you saw certain things in there which worried you about Parker, which you think that Anthony Joshua would be able to exploit. I don't know, we'll see. But as I was saying to somebody in the wake of this Joseph Parker fight, they may have spotted certain flaws that Joseph Parker has, but all fighters have flaws. You might see certain things that Parker does wrong, but don't think that Anthony Joshua don't do things wrong as well. Obviously, Joshua's taller than Parker. He's probably a better puncher than Parker. But Parker's a lot quicker than Joshua. Believe that. He's way quicker. He's more fluid. Yeah? Much better combination puncher. So, there's pluses and minuses to both fighters. Anyway, let me not long this video out. Let me know how you feel in the comment section below. It's your boy Hatman, I'm out.